Welcome to another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton. And today's guest is Dr. Lindsay Mumma. She's a doctor of chiropractic and the COO and editor-in-chief of BIRTHFIT, as well as the owner of BIRTHFIT North Carolina and Triangle Chiropractic and Rehabilitation Center. She and her husband, Chris, live in Raleigh with their 2 sons. She primarily works with women as they transition into motherhood, but loves helping women and humans move and feel their best. She loves learning new things and writing her own script for life. For more information, please visit her website for BIRTHFIT at birthfit.com. Hi, Lindsay. Welcome to the show. Excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm excited to connect with a fellow chiropractor, soul sister, who is super passionate about shifting the birth culture, especially in the United States. And we're going to have a lot to talk about today. I know the topic here is how to make intuitive, empowered choices throughout your parenthood transition. So let's start off with just sharing with the audience about who you are and how you got into this expertise.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that, you have a space for sharing about this, because I think the more conversations that we have, the more that we start to get towards those intuitive, empowered choices, because the more that we are open to listening and, whether that's to others or our own self, then the more that we are open to, possibly making new choices. So thank you. And yeah, I'm a chiropractor. As you said, I practice in Raleigh, North Carolina. I started my practice in 2012, which was also the same year that I decided that, my husband and I decided, it was not a unilateral decision, but we decided that we would have a baby. And I had focused throughout school on, rehab primarily and sports performance. And I did a ton of continuing ed when I was in chiropractic college, but almost all of it was in rehab. And I only did one extra course in pregnancy. And then we had, our general education in pregnancy. And, but that wasn't my intended population that I was going to see in my practice. So I didn't put a lot of effort and energy into studying that. And I kind of figured that, I got a bachelor's degree, I got a doctorate degree, I would definitely be okay for taking care of pregnant people in my office, obviously. I was wrong about that. And I'm not speaking ill of my chiropractic education or my undergraduate, like they were both valuable tools and gave me lots, but pregnancy and specifically postpartum are so complex and at the same time so mundane, and there's just so many different layers of the creation of human life and the caring of human life and the birthing of human life and the feeding of human life. And there are so many different facets of it, and it happens every single day, multiple times a day, all around the world. And that's what makes it mundane. And at the same time, it is this miraculous, beautiful, transformative event that changes you from your cells to your spirit and everything in between. And so I was woefully underprepared to see pregnant patients and postpartum patients. But I was certainly doing the best that I could with the tools that I had. And, I did, after graduation, I went on to take some more pregnancy courses just because I wanted to be a little bit more prepared. But when it came to, we'd like to get pregnant this year, I was like, okay, I'm going to, mind, body, soul, we're going to be ready for this. And I was like, ready to jump into more specific nutrition and movement. And I wanted to, make sure that my husband and I were in a really good place. And so as I was doing this, I came across this blog that was called BIRTHFIT, and it was written by a chiropractor whose name was Lindsay. And so I was like, oh, well, we are friends. And I, and as it turns out, like we actually have distant relatives related. So we're like legitimate soul sisters. But I told her, I have some people that I would trust to refer my patients to if they were in a different area, who aren't just educated on pregnancy, but are also educated on movement. And that's really what brought a lot of people to BirthFit originally, was that it was pregnancy and it was movement. Because a lot of things that were geared towards pregnant people were just about the pregnancy, but it wasn't really quality movement. And a lot of people that had really good movement stuff didn't have anything for pregnancy. And so, coming from a chiropractor who was also a doula and a strength and conditioning coach, she really had a lot of great things to say on her blog. And so it was like a social media sort of interaction of some sort. And it was on Facebook, which is funny because I joke that anytime I see Lindsay Matthews on Facebook, I will like call it out, like, oh my gosh, Lindsay Matthews is on Facebook. That never happens. We've grown a lot more via Instagram, and I think it's just an easier shareable platform than Facebook. But so she asked me if I would do an interview for the blog, and I was like, yeah, sure. And then I said, I really think that we should do like some sort of directory or something and, make something of this. And she was like, yeah, I think we should. And so she kind of took the idea of like, make something of this and just sprinted away with it. Like she just ran with it. And so she had started teaching a postpartum series in Venice, California. In 2014, I taught the first one of those that was not in LA, here in Raleigh. And we had 5 people who were doing that around the country. And then, just kind of doubled and then tripled and then quadrupled. And then now, there are hundreds of BirthFit coaches and BirthFit professionals who are around the world and in multiple countries. And, it's exciting to see, how much it's grown and how much we've been able to actually make change in the communities where we have BirthFit coaches and professionals, and where we have, these BirthFit leaders who are educating their communities. We're seeing changes, and it's happening on an individual level, but individuals are who make up communities. And so it's been really, really cool to see that, play out over the past couple of years.
Wow, that's really impressive. So tell us, what is BirthFit?
So BirthFit is a movement of coaches and professionals and parents and humans of all sorts who are intending to change the way that the world views birth. And we have 4 pillars, which are fitness, nutrition, mindset, and connection. And all of our content and curriculum is based on those 4 pillars and how they can be woven together so that parents BirthFit is for everyone. So it's totally applicable to people who never want to be parents or people who can't. And so that they can make informed and intuitively guided decisions. Because one of the things, in 2012, when I found the BirthFit blog, there was so much stigma around exercising during your pregnancy that is not really present any longer to a degree. And I largely think that is because of social media, because the more that you see things, the more normal that they become. And the more that you see a pregnant person who's deadlifting or, doing pull-ups or whatever movement, the more normal that it becomes. Whereas in 2012, when I was planning to get pregnant and I was looking for resources on, can I maintain the level of intensity that I have with my exercise right now? I was doing CrossFit at the time. And, and there were a couple of examples of like, this is appropriate exercise during pregnancy. And none of it was anything that I was really interested in. I love to move and I love to be athletic. And so I didn't want to get on an elliptical and do water aerobics. Like those things were not of interest to me. And so, so to find the BirthFit blog where she had like, workouts that she was posting, I was like, this is great. This is really fantastic. So the movement now includes education for coaches and education for professionals, such as chiropractors and PTs and OBs. And, we have doulas and nutritionists and acupuncturists and nurse practitioners. And we have neonatologist who's taken the BIRTHFIT professional seminar. We have lots and lots of different people, and we have midwives, and I'm probably skipping a few professionals. I apologize if they're listening and I skipped over their profession, but they are valuable assets to the BIRTHFIT movement because, all of these different professions coming together to discuss care for pregnancy and postpartum is really, really valuable because we don't see a lot of that. There's not a lot of, back and forth between different providers.
Right.
And
That interprofessionalism, it's really important.
Yeah. And especially in something that is so big as birth. And that's something that affects everyone. And so we need to be having these big and tough conversations because we need to have change. We're at a rate of 33% cesarean across the United States. 1 in 5 maternal deaths, up to 2 in 5 maternal deaths are completely preventable. And we have the highest maternal and infant mortality and morbidity among industrialized nations. We're doing a lot of things wrong. And so if we just bury our head in the sand and we don't talk to each other and we don't have the tough conversations on how can we change this and how can we do better, and why are Black women 3 to 5 times more likely to die from giving birth than white women? Like, if we're not willing to have those conversations about how we can change what's going on in birth in America and around the world within industrialized nations, then we can't make change. And so bringing multiple professionals into the same discussion, I think, is a really powerful part of what we're doing. And on the coach side, we have plenty of coaches who are like, oh yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, but they have no frame of reference for how to support a pregnant body through the biomechanical changes that a provider can understand, but isn't going to the gym with them. And so kind of meshing the knowledge that professionals have with the skill set and knowledge that coaches have to give everybody the best possible tools so that they can help the people that they're working with. That's kind of what we're doing.
Wow, that's so cool. I do love
ticket item.
Yeah, the more I think that, specifically a pregnant woman who has a lot of needs and a lot of questions, the more her birth team, you're really describing a birth team here, and the more they're on the same page, and in really providing individualized, specific care for that woman. I mean, what an amazing, empowered pregnancy and birth she's going to have.
Yeah. And I mean, setting yourself up for the perfect scenario doesn't mean that you get the perfect scenario, but if it comes from a place of empowerment and decision-making that you felt you had a part in, then that is a positive outcome for that family. When they feel like they've had a say and like they were able to make choices that were not forced upon them or they weren't coerced into, then that's huge, because there's so much of that going on in the birth world right now. And one of the things that we recognize, the birth team, you wouldn't normally think, like you were saying, sometimes people are curious, like, okay, well, what does chiropractic have to do with birth? We're not attending births and we're not, birthing babies, but chiropractors working with pregnant women is so important because they're coming to see us probably sometimes more frequently than they're seeing their birth provider, their OB or their midwife.
Oh yeah.
But who they're seeing more than us? Their coach. So if they're working out with a coach, they're seeing them multiple times per week often. And so we absolutely need to have coaches who can help guide them towards resources. Not a coach who just knows everything and has all of the knowledge of a midwife and an OB and a chiropractor and a PT, all together, but someone who understands that if they're asking questions about pelvic floor dysfunction, because they're talking to their coaches if they pee their pants.
Right.
They might not even say that to their OB because their OB might actually tell them that that's just part of pregnancy, which is BS in my opinion. But, right. But they'll talk to their coach about it. And if their coach is like, yeah, you know what? I have this wonderful pelvic PT. I would love to give you a card to go and make an appointment. Or if they start talking about like they're feeling really overwhelmed and anxious, then they can refer them to a counselor who specializes in PMADs. And they're talking about some discomfort that they have in a lunge or a squat. And they're like, hey, here's the chiropractor you need to go see. And being able to give them options. And then just even asking questions like, what are you doing for childbirth education? Because when you ask a question like that, there's an assumption that you need to be doing childbirth education. Because when you have a 1 in 3 C-section rate and maternal and infant deaths happening, we need some education going on around here.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that needs to change. And, we're making small ripples, but those small ripples are making big waves. And I'm really proud of having been part of an organization that is making change.
Mm-hmm. It's so cool.
Yeah, it's cool to see it play out. Like, we're seeing more mother and baby friendly practices in hospitals in Raleigh. And I'm not going to take credit for that, but like I said, it's those ripple effects. So like, when somebody has a really great experience because they got informed and they made conscious choices, then they tell their friend, who then is like, I want to be informed and make conscious choices. And then everybody starts voting with their dollars, and birthing places have to, they have to, appeal to their consumers, because birth is a business. And so if the community is demanding that they have options and they have more choices, then we're seeing less unnecessary inductions at 39 and 5, and more, okay, let's monitor. How are we doing if we go past XYZ date? And that's powerful to see.
It is powerful. And, the being empowered as a woman, I think, is contagious. And it is something, because especially as women, we love to share and connect with other women. So there's an opportunity for that effect to spread, right? And then these women are sharing their amazing empowered birth stories, which is very much in contrast from the negative birth stories that were kind of very much part of our culture.
Yeah, you're just fed those on repeat through media in various forms. Yeah.
Right. So now we can tell a different story and let women know there's a different story available for them. And I think it's really powerful that if it's like somebody they personally know has that story, right? As opposed to just reading about it in a book or even seeing it either through the media, which I don't think really exists too much. But, having that positive story, just be like, oh, wow, if she had that type of birth, maybe that's possible for me too. Because it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know I was doing some research on the BIRTHFIT website, and I saw that there are 4 pillars. Do you want to go a little bit into that?
Yeah, for sure. So fitness, nutrition, mindset, and connection are the 4 pillars. And so I'll kind of play them out. So fitness is the moving in all 3 planes and being mindful of the seasons and the cycles that a body goes through. So, a woman who's in her first trimester of pregnancy and nauseous from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and has 6:30 p.m. where she can get in some amount of movement and that feels good to her, is not going to be moving in the same way that a woman who's in the second half of her first trimester and her nausea has lifted and she's feeling amazing and she's getting into the second trimester, energy boost that a lot of people experience. They're in different cycles of their life and of their pregnancy, even though they're technically in the same, they're both in the first trimester. So we really try to meet people where they are for their fitness so that they can have mobility and they can have stability. And we really focus on having a strong and stable and dynamic core. So a lot of the foundation of our core information has come from dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, which is out of the Czech Republic in Prague. And it's an incredible educational resource for professionals, coaches, anyone really. And so we really focus on having task specific intra-abdominal pressure as we go through movements. But if we were to just be about fitness, then it would just be, this rep scheme or that rep scheme, and you could check the box. But if you're intentional about your movement practice and what that looks like through your different seasons and cycles, then your movement practice can serve you better. Because if I've had a really stressful week at work and then I go and I kill it at the gym, I'm not going to be doing myself any favors. I need to be able to tune into my body. But if you just tell people I'll just listen to your body, well, that's great advice if they know how. It's not great advice if they have never understood how they can listen to their own body's cues. And so we work to allow for time and space to kind of sink into the body and feel and listen, so they get that sort of information. And that it's a mindful practice. So that kind of flows into mindset and connection. And so our movement practices are as intuitive as possible, even if they're new movements for people, because we give time for breath and truly warming up before we get into movement, and then for down regulation at the end of a workout. So it's pretty cool in that way. And nutrition is something that it probably has as much dogma around it as anything else in the world. So we pay really close attention to not just the foods that we're eating, but like who we are as an eater. And a lot of that information has come from the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. And so we really, again, paying attention to the cycles and the seasons of what's going on within the body and within life, and eating a variety of foods that are actual real foods that are in season and have lots of color and variety, and taking some deep breaths before we eat so that we're able to downregulate our autonomic nervous system and actually tune in to the food that we're putting into our bodies for nourishment. And so there's a lot of mindset and connection that plays into that as well. And so all four pillars just kind of like overlay each other and really beautifully weave together so that they're essentially dependent upon one another. Because if you have, okay, I've got, this many macros that I met today, and I met all of my micronutrients, and the whole time that I was doing it, I was working on my computer and eating while working, and I never took a break to just connect with my food and really pay attention to how full I was. I just was tracking it on an app, so we really encourage people to kind of tune into their feminine energy and let them go into what they are feeling instead of just what caloric needs are being met. And there's definitely a space for what caloric needs are being met, but, allowing those intuitive cues to come out through nutrition is a huge source of empowerment for so many people who, I think a lot of people, women specifically, are suffering with their relationship with food today, and pregnancy can be really a challenging time for that, and postpartum as well. So,
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so like, there's a couple things there. Like, we know that there can be addiction to food, right? And that can be, I think, a physical addiction with sugar and processed food and chemicals that are part of our standard American diet. But then there's also the emotional addiction as well, where we're perhaps have an external stressor. It could be the pregnancy. It could be something else going on in our life. And the way we're managing that stress is through suppression with food, right? So there's like a twofold effect there. But regardless, it's not eating the food from a nutrient fuel a perspective of what does my body need right now from a health fuel perspective. It's more like suppress.
Yeah. And so many people are doing that on a regular basis, even and not in a way that looks like it's troubling.
Right.
But I'm tired, I reach for an extra cup of coffee. I'm stressed, I reach for an extra glass of wine. I'm feeling frustrated, I grab myself an extra bar of candy. Like we as Americans kind of do that all the time. And so taking a second to just tune into, you know what, I'm going to choose to eat this cupcake because it is my son's birthday and I'm feeling celebratory. And in this moment, I'm choosing celebration. Now, for me personally, I'm going to choose a gluten-free, dairy-free cupcake because that's going to agree with me much better than one that is laden with gluten and dairy. But it's still got sugar in it, and it's still not something that I want to be eating on a regular basis if my intention is to live a long and healthy, happy life. But in this celebratory moment, this cupcake is a hell of a lot better than a bucket of kale.
Yeah.
You know?
That's right. I live by the 80-20 rule. Like, I don't eat perfectly 100% of the time, but I make an effort for 80%. And that other 20% is about consciously choosing to quote unquote cheat, right? But cheating from this is about quality of life.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, I really try to shy away from even calling them cheat days or cheat meals because I, I like every single meal is just a choice for me to determine. But in order for me to make that choice, I have to know what my intention is. So if my intention is to eat as quickly as possible, then McDonald's is going to beat out Whole Foods any day. Because if I go to Whole Foods, I have to get out of my car. I've got my kids, so I've got to unbuckle them. I've got to go into the hot bar and grab myself something off of there. I have to read the ingredients while I'm on there because I don't know if I want this or that or whatever. And then I've got to go wait in the checkout line. So like that's a whole process. Whereas if I want food quickly, if that is my intention, then I'm going through the drive-thru at McDonald's. But if I want to choose the most nutrient dense foods possible for me, then I'm not going through the drive-thru at McDonald's. So it depends on what my intention is. And then every meal is an opportunity to make that choice. What is my intention? Well, my intention is to feel really, really amazing today. Okay, well, then I am not going to choose to eat leftover Halloween candy, you know? And so I make a choice before I put something in my mouth. And now that is not something that I do every single time that I put something in my mouth, but I have the opportunity to. And I know that. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? I do not have the mental capacity or the energy right now to make a mental choice. And I am going to unconsciously eat whatever I feel like. But that's still a choice. Everything is a choice, whether we're consciously making it or not. So, yeah. And I think that nutrition for a lot of people ends up being a really scary thing. I think the weight gain of pregnancy and then the weight fluctuations in the postpartum time period end up being really emotionally challenging for people. And if you can kind of unwind that to just small choices and what is your intention? My intention is to heal my body and to be able to continue to supply breast milk to my child. Well, then I'm not going on a detox diet when I'm, 3 months postpartum. And if I know what my intention is, then I can make an informed decision. Yeah. So obviously nutrition is kind of one that's a big one. And there are so many aspects of mindset and connection. And so mindset is creating a space between a stimulus and response, because the knee-jerk reaction is protective and helpful, but not always the best choice for us in that moment. And so taking some time to take a couple more breaths and have some space between what is the stimulus and then what is my chosen response, and making choices based on love and not fear. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing in birth in America so frequently are fear-based choices.
Oh, I could not agree with you more on that. That is a big part of where I'm coming from with getting information out to women and empowering them through my podcast and other avenues. And that's my mantra that I say over and over again, especially to pregnant women, is we have an opportunity to make a choice. We do, at least speaking of really most women living in America, there are choices, right? We're not in this third world country without options. We have choices. We have options, even if we don't think we do, right? They're out there, and it just sometimes requires a little bit of extra research, which with the internet now, there's plenty of information out there.
Yeah.
And then really ideally working with a birth team who's going to provide even more resources and more referrals and more support in helping you feel really clear about what you want to consciously create for yourself. And that's all through conscious choice.
Yeah. Yep. And there's always that opportunity for choice. Like you said, even if you don't necessarily realize that you have choices, you do.
Right.
And sometimes it's choosing between one hard choice and another hard choice, but you always have choices.
Right. And that, their choices are not always easy, but when we make a choice because we're afraid, then typically we're really not making the choice that's in our best interest and the best interest of our family and our baby. So, when fear comes up, it is an opportunity. Ideally, you don't have to make a choice right that second, right? Assuming it's not life or death.
Right.
And there's an opportunity to really sit with that and be like, well, what is this triggering in me? Why am I feeling this fear? Where is this really coming from? And that's deep work. But I think that pregnancy has us go there for a reason, because when we do that deeper work, it really sets us up to be more of a conscious parent. And man, I'll tell you what, that's now I have a 2-year-old son. So I'm like completely on that place of getting triggered, like all, constantly being triggered by my son, and how I react to him is my choice. And so there's such an opportunity for me to grow because of those triggers. But the conscious work I did during my pregnancy, I feel like is helping me be the best parent I can be.
Yeah, significantly. And like you said, pregnancy calls us to that place. So we can choose to do the work, or it's just going to show up on our doorstep anyways.
Yeah, it's not going away, right? It's not going away.
Right, exactly. Okay, so the last pillar of BirthFit is connection. And that we actually, we expanded to that definition last year because we really wanted to ensure that people weren't just like, okay, I'm checking off the boxes, I'm doing the fitness, I'm doing the nutrition, I did my 10 minutes of meditation, but I like, am I connected? So to self, to others, to my baby, to my family, to like whatever my higher source is, and whatever that means to me, like, am I connected? Because if you think about, maybe somebody who comes in and sees you and gets adjusted, and she goes and sees a pelvic health PT who's awesome, and she has a really great midwife who's fantastic, but she doesn't really have a support network. And you're not talking to the PT, who's not talking to the OB, and there's no connection there. And she's not really feeling connected or supported because she doesn't have anybody who's holding her. She doesn't have the community around her. Then her experience is going to be significantly subpar compared to what she could be experiencing if there was that element of connection there. And so that one's a really important one. And that is, our definition of that is to open pathways from the cellular to the metaphysical level, wherein a human can experience and express their fullest potential. And I think it's super powerful. And that connection is what we're all searching for as we scroll through Instagram for 45 straight minutes. And it's what we're searching for when we're trolling on moms groups and, overtake somebody else's post where they're asking advice about nursing. And then we start to lambaste people with our, horror stories of when our nipples were cracked and bleeding, like we're searching for connection. And so I think that that's such an important part of becoming a parent, because you're like electrically charged with the potential for connection, and it's not being met in so many ways. And I think that's dangerous, realistically. So.
Yes. And that's definitely, something that's a product of our modern society, right? Like back in the day, women were part of a village, and when they became a mother, they were surrounded by other women who had gone before them, right? And there was just this constant support, especially those first 40 days postpartum. So we don't see that quite as much anymore. So, the reality is that, not a lot of women necessarily have like that family support locally. And so besides internet, how else can women get that connection?
Yeah. Well, so we, the BirthFit leaders around the world are offering these places for connection. So with me in Raleigh, North Carolina, you can come and you can take the BirthFit prenatal series. It's the childbirth education class. And that is a comprehensive childbirth education class that goes over the actual history of birth in America, which is staggeringly terrifying. And then also goes through, general childbirth education. And so many people just don't even know what a contraction is, and kind of like pulling back the curtain on these terms that are used. Like, people don't understand what effacement means. They just know they're 60% effaced. And so to really kind of like unwind all of that vocabulary for people is really powerful. But when you have that, and you're also doing intentional work in the BIRTHFIT prenatal series, like as a couple and as an individual. And then we also do postpartum preparation in that course, which I think is something that is largely overlooked. Childbirth education, obviously, for most people is about just childbirth education, but after the child is born, then there's this postpartum healing time period, and we need to be prepared for what's coming with that. And so we do that in the BIRTHFIT prenatal series. And so, you get some community with other parents in that aspect, just asking other questions and being in class along with them. At my chiropractic office, we offer a women's fitness class where we have just general women's fitness that has BIRTHFIT coaches and BIRTHFIT professionals are teaching this. And so they're coming to it with fitness, nutrition, mindset, and connection going into our movement-based classes where we're talking about mindset and we're talking about nutrition. And it's a really cool class. And so there's, cool community that comes along with that. And then in the postpartum time period, this is where we kind of really excel. BIRTHFIT, I think, is honestly revolutionizing the postpartum period because the BIRTHFIT postpartum series is intentional rehabilitation for the postpartum body, for the postpartum mind, and for the postpartum soul. I'm not overstating that because the physical changes that happen during pregnancy and then will rapidly happen immediately postpartum and then continue to happen over the first postpartum year and into the second postpartum year, those things are vast and they're significantly overlooked because everybody, regardless of if they had an emergency cesarean after a 36-hour labor, or if they had a 4-hour vaginal birth with no interventions and no tearing and no complications, they're getting a 6-week checkup. And they're being sent on their way with a green flag for sex and activity and go to town. And their body needs so much more than that. And so that's where we have movement-based classes that are intentionally reintroducing movement to the postpartum body. And in those classes, we're talking about the struggles and the triumphs of what's going on. And so it's a community support situation, and they're creating new connections with other new moms, and they're moving, which always brings up more emotions than just sitting stagnantly, which I'm sure you've experienced in your office. Sometimes adjustments come with a side of tears, and those that allows for the actual release of things. And so they're getting so much healing that is really being overlooked. So we do offer online courses for prenatal workouts and for postpartum recovery and rehabilitation and rebuilding, but the in-person classes are really they're just truly magical because when you get a group of women together who have recently given birth and they're intentionally wanting to heal themselves and they're taking that time to do that for themselves, it's pretty cool to see what happens.
That's beautiful. Are the babies hanging out on the floor with them while they're working out?
Yeah. So the way that I have, for our classes, and this isn't true, everywhere where there's BIRTHFIT, but this is, I really wanted to eliminate all barriers to entry for people signing up for classes because there are so many barriers to entry when you're a new mom. So if you have a non-mobile baby, they are welcome to be in class with you. And if you have, sorry, my husband just walked in. I don't know if you can hear the door creak. If you have a mobile baby, then we actually offer in-person childcare. So the back half of my office is where the gym is, and the front half of my office is where the chiropractic and massage and acupuncture and our infrared sauna, all of that is up in the front. It looks like a normal office, but the back is a gym. And so in the back is where we're working out. And in the front, I have a whole play area for kids during appointments anyways. And so we just have childcare offered on site for $2 per kid.
Wow.
So I just, I was I will pay somebody to be here, and then we'll just give them extra money if there, happen to be a lot of children that are in class. So if kids are mobile, then they go up front to childcare. And if they're, if they're not mobile yet, then they're just hanging out with mom in the back. And that, you need to nurse, you need to change a diaper, you need to, do whatever you need to do. And you're just doing it next to somebody else who happens to be, moving through a shin box flow. So it's there's a lot of community that gets built kind of with like the camaraderie of that new postpartum time period.
Yeah, I could see why there would be some really deep friendships that would form, because these women are, in very similar stages in their journey of motherhood and live locally, right, to each other. So they, beyond just working out together, there's an opportunity to, hey, let's go get lunch and have play dates, and their kids can grow up together.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much potential there for that connection to just continue to live out. It's really cool.
That is so cool. I love that. And I really appreciate that you're, recognizing that, new moms need help with childcare. I mean, in our practice, we have moms come in all the time, and ideally both mom and baby are getting chiropractic. But while mom is receiving her adjustment, if the baby needs to be held or fed, my receptionist will do that. It's just kind of part of the job description. And I even just interviewed and hired a part-time person for the front desk. And I was like, you have to be comfortable with holding a baby, and you might be holding a baby, answering the phone, checking somebody out. I'm like, it's called multitasking. Is that cool with you? Because if somebody's not okay with that, then they can't work in my office.
They'll be uncomfortable working there for sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's important. We don't want women to not come in and get the care they need because they don't have
somebody to watch their kid.
Exactly.
Well, and then you think about just like the financial implications of that. If every single time I have to go to an appointment, I have to pay somebody else to watch my kid, then my appointment just became that much more expensive. Right. And that's another barrier to entry for me going to get the care that I need.
That's right.
So I have a pickler triangle. I have a rocking boat that flips over and turns into stairs. I've got a play kitchen, and just, a smattering of books and random toys so that they can play and enjoy themselves. And then I've got a cushion on the floor, which is kind of like a nice little reading nook. And it's just adorable to see kids go and sit there and like read or pretend to read to each other. It's quite great.
That is so cute. Yeah, that's the family chiropractic, office. Yep. It's really just being open to having the whole family come in, receive care, and then when that individual family member is not getting their adjustment, they're hanging out with the toys.
Yeah, they got something to do.
That's right. Well, Lindsay, this was such an amazing conversation. I really am excited to have you share all these really powerful information about BIRTHFIT. Do you have any last thoughts that you'd like to wrap up with?
No, I encourage you, if you are a parent, to go to birthfit.com /DIR for the directory. Find somebody who's near you, because they're an awesome resource and they have been well educated. And if you're a practitioner or a coach, whoever you are in the world, there's something from BIRTHFIT for you. It's a really incredible organization to be part of. And because there are so many incredible people, people like you who are wanting to change the game, and we are. And so it's really cool when we can do that together, because we make bigger waves.
Beautiful. Well, thank you once again for coming on the show today.
Yes, thank you. It was great to chat with you. If you head to Raleigh anytime soon, hit me up.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thanks.